Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. A Vow will release in February. Before that happens, I'd like to finish the last of our Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire content. I've already dropped a review, party member ranking, and an updated guide walking through all of the mechanics, and there are links in the description for those videos. Speaking of which, if I use terms during this video that you are unfamiliar with, it would probably be a good idea to reference the guide and get up to speed on basic terminology. It's been a while since I released those videos, but I haven't forgotten that I also promised my community we would rank all 11 classes in the game. We did a similar series for Pillars of Eternity 1, and I'll leave a link down in the description for the video where I walk through that final list. This series of videos will be a bit different because not only will I go through the class mechanics, but I'll also give a brief breakdown of the multi-classing options, and I'll provide you with an example build that I would use. Hopefully, all of this information together will provide the content you need to have a smooth playthrough. If you have additional questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments below, or there's a link in the description to join our Discord, where we have an active community that loves talking about CRPGs. Please keep in mind that Deadfire has a ton of different gear and consumables that make a wide variety of build options viable. I may say something isn't particularly good, and then someone in the comments will provide examples of armor and or weapons that make the passive or ability really shine. Make sure you glance through the comments because, as I mentioned before, my community loves talking about CRPGs. On that same note, here at Slandered Gaming, you'll constantly see content about CRPGs, so if that interests you, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more videos. The first class we review is Barbarian. These are melee combatants who harness their rage to devastating effect on the battlefield. This class is fantastic at tanking, dealing melee damage, and crowd control, as you'll soon see. Barbarians start with a base health of 46, and they get 16 more per level, which gives them the largest health pool out of all the classes. They also start with a rank of 30 in Fortitude, which enables them to effectively resist internal physical attacks such as poison and disease. On the flip side, Barbarians start with a rank of 15 in Will and Deflection, which is the most important defensive stat, and that number is less than what Paladins and most especially fighters get. This lets you know right out the bat that making Barbarians into pure tanks is more difficult than it is with those two classes, but as you will see, there are offensive options which help make up for this. Barbarians start with a +2 bonus to the Intimidate, Survival, Athletics, Stealth, and History skills. Athletics is a no-brainer, as the second win option will be invaluable for your frontline fighter. Intimidate also obviously fits in very well from a thematic standpoint. All Barbarian abilities require the Rage resource in order to be used. Rage automatically refills outside of combat, so technically, Barbarians can be at their very best at the start of every single fight, as opposed to other classes that need to rest consistently. At level 1, not only are you going to get Rage, but you'll also get Carnage. This triggers when you hit an enemy with a melee weapon and causes a secondary attack against all foes within a certain range, which deals 33% of that weapon's base damage. The size of that range depends on your intelligence score, so Barbarians can greatly benefit from characters having a high intelligence. The damage dealt is raw, so it automatically bypasses an enemy's armor, but keep in mind Carnage is a separate attack, so it's possible the attack will fail and deal no damage. Also keep in mind, Carnage only triggers on hits, which means grazes will have no effect. While the damage of this ability is based on your weapon's base damage, that doesn't necessarily mean you should use a heavy two-handed weapon. There's a school of thought that says dual-wielding lighter weapons allows you to trigger Carnage so many times that it's a more effective way of delivering the pain. In that scenario, Carnage will use the base damage of the weapon in your main hand. Also note that if you do decide to use a two-handed weapon, then might becomes much more important, as it can significantly impact how much damage Carnage dishes out. A one-handed weapon will have significantly lower base damage and consequently won't have as big an effect. This ability was absolutely brutal in Pillars 1, but it's been nerfed in Deadfire, and you can make the case that the best Barbarian builds don't focus on Carnage at all. It doesn't trigger on-hit weapon effects or generate focus or any other add-on you can think of. Now, it strictly deals damage, which was not the case in the last game. Barbarians get multiple subclasses, but they change the mechanics for your power level 1 abilities, so let's review them first. Barbaric Yell costs 1 rage point and causes enemies in a cone to become shaken for 20 seconds. So basically, this will make enemies more susceptible to all forms of attack while also causing them to deal less damage. It's okay, but at level 1, your party most likely has better forms of crowd control, so I would argue triggering Carnage would be a better use of your Barbarian's time. At power level 4, you could choose between 2 mutually exclusive upgrades. Barbaric Roar causes enemies in a line to become both shaken and interrupted. Interrupted enemies either stop their current action or they lose a point of concentration. This can be fantastic to use against spellcasters to stop them from deploying nasty crowd control effects, but I don't like that you have to use it in a line. Barbaric Shout will increase the amount of enemies you can engage with by 3. All characters have a limited amount of engagement slots, and Barbarian mechanics rarely give you a way to gain more. If you want this character to hold the line, then using a yell to ensure more enemies will stick to them could be useful. Even more importantly, this ability will impact all nearby enemies instead of just a line of them. If you are a pure Barbarian, I would go with Shout, but if you are multi-classing, then you cannot get the final upgrade, and the debuff from Barbaric Roar is more impactful, so I would select that if you are determined to use this ability. Finally, at power level 9, if you selected Barbaric Roar, you can take Driving Roar, which pushes enemies back and potentially knocks them down, along with dealing a decent amount of crush damage. This is on top of interrupting them, so it's possible to stop an enemy's action even if you don't successfully knock them prone. All the way around, it's a powerful crowd control effect, and keep in mind you can still activate this at the cost of 1 rage, and the cast time is very fast as well. It still comes out in a line though, so you'll miss some nearby enemies. The other option is Dazing Shout, which will deal less crush damage while also dazing enemies, which causes them to be less effective in combat. The radius ensures you hit more enemies, but the effect is clearly weaker. Again, I would skip Barbaric Yell because it takes too long before it's truly useful, and I believe Barbarians are much better when multi-class, which removes these final upgrades. The other PL1 ability you get is Frenzy, which can be triggered at the cost of 1 rage point. This will increase your action speed by 25%, reduce your deflection by 10, and give you both the strong and fit inspirations for 15 seconds. There is no recovery time for this ability, so you can pop it and immediately start hacking away. Regardless of your build, Frenzy is a must-have ability that you will want to use early and often. At PL7, you can choose between 2 mutually exclusive upgrades. Blood Frenzy allows you to deal a small amount of raw damage onto enemies whenever you land a critical hit. This can be fantastic on a speed build when you are constantly churning out attacks and landing crits, but I would go with the alternative upgrade. Spirit Frenzy allows you to stagger enemies when you hit them. This is just a mediocre debuff, but taking this upgrade is required for you to access Spirit Tornado at power level 7. This upgrade causes all nearby enemies to experience a small amount of freeze damage, and even more importantly, there's a chance they will become terrified for 4 seconds. Terrified is an extremely powerful debuff that triggers disengagement attacks and renders enemies helpless. A high intelligence barbarian can shut down a whole room with this upgrade. The alternative option, Bloodstorm, extends the duration of your frenzy with each enemy that you kill. This is very nice in long boss battles, but most fights will be over within the 15 seconds of the base duration, and it only costs 1 rage to turn it back on, so this isn't all that useful. There's also a list of passive abilities you can choose from at PL1, but we will only review options that are unique to the Barbarian class. Blooded is triggered when you are bloodied or near death and provides a 25% increase to damage. Unless you are determined to make your Barbarian a brick house, this is a must-have skill. that will make the defensive vulnerabilities of this class much more useful to you. Many players prefer to utilize Barbarians with the human race, since they gain an increase in accuracy and damage when bloodied or near death. Keep in mind that bloodied and near death are based on a percentage of your total health pool, so the more points you place into Constitution, the more health you can have while still triggering these statuses. Also note that if you choose the Berserker subclass, bloodied popping up is a great way to track when your character is at low health. Alright, now that we have reviewed all the level 1 options, let's take a look at the subclasses. You do have the ability to choose no subclass, or the next choice is Berserker. This subclass upgrades your Frenzy ability so that now it provides the tenacious and hardy inspirations instead of strong and fit respectively. You also get a significant increase to how often hits are turned into crits while you are frenzied. The first bonus is fantastic early game, but by mid to late game, it'll most likely be rendered inconsequential if you have a decent buffer on your squad. The second upgrade will be helpful for your entire playthrough. There are 3 drawbacks with this class. You cannot see your health and you take raw damage continuously while frenzied. Not seeing your health isn't a big deal as long as you have a good healer. Plus, as I mentioned, there's a passive you can choose which only triggers when you are at low health, so there are ways around this. The raw damage also isn't a major problem as long as you keep might at manageable levels. The damage scales, and if your might is too high, things could become very annoying at later levels of the game. The third drawback is that you are confused while frenzied, which causes all of your attacks and abilities, including Carnage, to hit both allies and enemies. You also take a -5 penalty to intellect. Early in the game, you'll come across options that can make your character immune to confused, so this could be a very powerful option if you are willing to manage the penalties, and personally, I like this subclass a lot. Next up is Corpse Eater, which allows you to target a Kith, Wilder, or Beast and devour their corpse, healing you and restoring some of your rage. There should be a healer on your team, and or you should be leeching health. Also, rage is not a hard resource to manage. The benefits of this subclass are not worth it unless you are trying to do a solo run. In that case, Corpse Eater will provide you with much needed resources when facing the appropriate enemies. The penalty increases the cost of all rage abilities by 1, which honestly isn't a big deal because you probably don't use active abilities as a barbarian very often, but again, Corpse Eater just isn't worth it. Next is Mage Slayer, which causes all your attacks to place the spell disruption effect on enemy spellcasters. This gives them a chance to fail at casting a spell. You'll also gain a 25% bonus to passive spell resistance. Both of these bonuses are nice, but there are a ton of enemies who aren't spellcasters, so these advantages only apply to a limited number of foes. The penalty prevents you from using potions or scrolls, and your increased spell resistance counts against both friendly and hostile spells. Potions and scrolls provide a ton of versatility to your character, and resisting 25% of ally spells is just plain annoying. Skip this. Fury Shaper provides wards that are summoned creatures you can place on the battlefield, and they will provide your team with useful bonuses. At PL1, you get the Frenzy Ward, which provides a 10% increase to attack speed for all allies within a 4-meter radius. At PL4, you get the Fear Ward, which causes all enemies within a 2.5-meter radius to become terrified. I've already spoken about how amazing this debuff is, and you get access to this ward significantly earlier than the Spirit Tornado upgrade. Finally, at PL8, you get the Blood Ward, which returns 15% of damage dealt as healing to allies within a 4-meter radius. On top of all this, you get a +10 accuracy versus spirit targets, which are plentiful throughout the game. Obviously, all of these boosts can be useful in their own way. The drawback is, if one of your wards is destroyed, you take raw damage and your power level is reduced, which is obviously a very big deal. So you cannot just put down wards willy-nilly. Also, your will is reduced by 15, which effectively means you start with 0 will, making you very vulnerable to nasty crowd control effects. A good priest can help make this negligible, but it's still something you would have to manage your entire playthrough. If that's doable, then I believe the bonuses are worth it. Alright, now that we have covered the subclasses, let's circle back to the other Barbarian abilities. Barbaric Blow is a full attack that deals an additional 20% damage, and your Carnage area of effect will cover a 50% wider area. There's a 30% increase to the possibility this will be a crit, and if it crits, you will deal 50% more damage. This isn't worth it because Barbarians get fantastic passive options, and you are much better off repeatedly swinging your sword and triggering Carnage the normal way than diverting time towards using this. At PL5, you can choose between two mutually exclusive options. Crushing Blow allows you to instantly recover if the attack kills its target. This is really nice on a low dexterity build, as you'll be hungry for anything that increases your speed or lets you recover quickly, making this a great way to effectively eliminate soft targets. Barbaric Smash refunds the rage cost if the target is killed, but most times you will have plenty of rage, so this isn't worth it. On the passive side at PL2, you can take Thick Skin, which provides a +1 armor rating bonus to slash, crush, and pierce damage. You will also gain 1 additional engagement slot. Obviously, if you are going for a more tanky build, this will be useful. Accurate Carnage increases the accuracy of your Carnage attacks by 5. It's useful to ensure Carnage consistently connects, so this is worth picking up if you have an extra point. Finally, Wilder Hunter gives you a 25% damage bonus against wilder creatures. There's a lot of these enemies throughout your playthrough, but honestly, there's a ton of enemies who aren't wilder, so you should probably only pick this up if you happen to have an extra point to use. At PL3, you can select Wild Sprint, which will provide the nimble inspiration along with immunity to engagement. This is very useful if you want your character to run straight to the back line and eliminate spellcasters or ranged characters. Personally, I think it makes more sense to let the Barbarian just engage with the first enemy they come in contact with and let Carnage take care of the rest. Consequently, I would skip this option. An exception to this is if you are running a low dexterity, heavy armor Barbarian build. In that case, you could use Wild Sprint to ensure your character is fast enough to quickly close the distance with enemies before they can reach your back line. At PL6, you could choose between two mutually exclusive options. Lion Sprint will provide a +15 bonus to the accuracy of your next attack, which is obviously very useful. Ram Sprint allows you to shove back enemies when you activate the sprint. Again, I would say skip all of this. Looking at the PL3 passive abilities, the first one is One Stands Alone, which gives you a 20% increase to melee damage when you are around 2 or more enemies, and increases the amount of enemies required for them to flank you by 1. Unless you are using your Barbarian as a ranged character, this is a must-have ability. Bloody Slaughter causes 20% of your hits to be converted into crits and provides an additional 50% crit damage when attacking enemies with less than 25% of their health. This should get triggered all the time, and it's definitely something that you want. Finally, Bloodlust provides an additional 10% attack speed every time you kill an enemy. This is great no matter what, but it's especially fantastic if you have a low dexterity build and need special ways to boost your attack speed. The benefits of action speed plateaus, so I wouldn't say you should pick this up no matter what, but it's definitely something to consider. At PL4, you can select the Savage Defiance ability, which will provide the robust inspiration for 15 seconds. This will obviously make your character more tanky, but there's probably somebody else on the team who can apply this, and your Barbarian benefits from operating while injured. Then again, if you are playing on higher difficulties or soloing, this could be a great way to make your character more durable. At PL7, you can choose between two mutually exclusive upgrades. Savage Courage gives you concentration when using this ability, while Stalwart Defense decreases the rage cost to use it. Considering that the ability costs 3 rage points, I would probably go with the second option, but honestly, neither one of these are impressive. There's only one PL4 Barbarian passive ability. Unflinching ensures while the Barbarian is hurt or better, they will be resistant against body afflictions. These afflictions can significantly limit your ability to deal damage, so that's a great way to make sure your Barbarian is always effective. Moving to PL5, we have Leap, which allows you to jump in the air and land at a spot up to 15 meters away, dazing all nearby enemies. This is a super cool way to get to the exact spot you want to be while also debuffing enemies. Another great aspect of this ability that's not clear from the tooltip is that you can use it outside of combat. That means your Barbarian can potentially leap over traps and easily position themselves in hard to reach areas. It's not necessary necessary by any means, but I would definitely take it. At PL9, you could choose between two mutually exclusive upgrades. Panther's Leap allows you to deal slash and raw damage towards all nearby enemies, while Dragon Leap adds a burning area of effect. Of the two, I personally prefer Dragon's Leap, and I think it looks absolutely fantastic. Keep in mind that I prefer to multi-class Barbarians, and if you do that, the Leap upgrades are unavailable. Consequently, I skip this ability, but it is still very nice. The only unique passive ability at PL5 is Interrupting Blows, which provides a 50% chance to interrupt enemies when a melee critical hit connects. If you are stacking a ton of attack speed and or dual wielding, you should be getting crits all the time, and this is a great way to debuff enemies. At PL6, we've already covered the active abilities, so let's head straight to the passives, starting with Brute Force. This allows you to attack Fortitude instead of Deflection in situations where that defense is lower. By itself, this is trash, but if you have a caster, such as a priest, who is consistently lowering the Fortitude ranks of multiple enemies, then this could be very useful. Threatening Presence ensures you cannot be engaged by lower level enemies, which would make it much easier to quickly move towards backline foes. I prefer to just deal with the enemies in front of me, so I skip this, but it might be useful for you depending on your build. At PL7, we've already looked at the active abilities, and there's only one Barbarian unique passive, Bloodthirst. When you kill an enemy, your recovery bar is immediately reset, allowing you to perform another action. This isn't very useful for high dexterity dual wield builds, which will already be close to zero recovery time. For heavy armor, low dexterity, two-handed weapon builds, this is a monster ability that will let you pump out a lot more damage. Moving on to PL8, we have the Heart of Fury ability, which allows you to make a full attack against every nearby enemy, dealing 25% additional damage and triggering Carnage with each hit. When you are surrounded by a mob of elites, accept no substitutes, because this ability will truly shine. Note that it does cost 4 rage, so it's not something you can repeatedly spam unless you are a corpse eater. There's only one unique passive. Vengeful Defeat is triggered when you reach 0 health and will cause you to perform a full attack against all nearby enemies as long as you are holding a melee weapon. These hits will each trigger Carnage. Personally, I don't like this because my character shouldn't be dying, so there's no reason to take abilities requiring their death. Finally, at PL9, we have Instrument of Boundless Rage, which causes you to throw a weapon at a target, dealing a large amount of pierce and crush damage while also exploding, dealing fire damage to all nearby enemies. This can also knock the target prone, and it's great to use against bosses who are surrounded by their minions. That being said, I don't think it makes sense to have both Heart of Fury and this ability since the rage cost is so high for both. Personally, I would stick with Heart of Fury since it will almost certainly pump out more damage when you are completely surrounded. Moving on to the passives, Blood Surge gives you a 25% chance to gain 1 rage point after a kill. Prior to this, I've always said that rage is not really a resource you need to worry about managing, but if you want to be able to spam Heart of Fury more often, that 4 rage is a costly amount, so this might be worth taking. And then last on the list, Barbaric Retaliation is triggered when a critical hit against you connects and allows you to make a full attack against the enemy. Depending on your build, foes will land critical hits often, and this could be very useful to have. Alright, now that we have covered all the abilities, let's briefly talk about multi-classing options. Keep in mind that when you multi-class, you lose access to the last 2 power levels of both classes, but obviously you are able to take abilities for both of them. In my opinion, the last 2 levels of Barbarian really aren't that impressive in comparison to what you could get from adding on more options, so I prefer to take this route. The other major consideration is that both classes will advance through PLs much slower. This is a big deal for Barbarians because the PL abilities Spirit Tornado and Bloodthirst both have such a major impact on the viability of your build. Multi-classing will significantly delay when you can pick those up. Starting from the top, Barbarians and Chanters mixed together create a Howler. Both classes benefit greatly from intelligence, so you could have Carnage decimating enemies while also using Chanter passives that will have a similar effect. This is one of my favorite ways to multi-class Barbarian, and I highly recommend it. A cipher multi-class creates a witch, and the interesting thing about this is single-class ciphers are much easier to use at range, so going this route makes it more viable to enter melee distance and generate the focus needed to launch your abilities. Keep in mind this scenario also makes concentration a lot more important. A druid multi-class creates a tempest, and personally, I don't think this is effective. Obviously, it will help make the druid shape-shifting abilities more powerful, but their spell casting is really where it's at, and I don't think these two classes help each other compared to other options. A fighter multi-class creates a brute, which is capable of achieving one of the highest melee crit chances possible in the game. A high dexterity and dual wielding brute with effective on-crit weapon enchantments can absolutely melt everything on your screen. You can also go the pure tank route, and fighter mechanics will make that much easier for the Barbarian. A monk multi-class creates a Ravager, which is a combination I don't care for unless your Barbarian is a Berserker. In that case, while you are frenzied, the self-damage will generate wounds, allowing you to dish out even more monk pain. Since monks are focused on self-harm anyway, this will drive your health even further down and help you make use of Barbarian's fantastic low health passives. Kind of a glass cannon and more dangerous than how I like to play, but it can be great. A Paladin multi-class creates a Fanatic, and this is another combination which greatly benefits from high intelligence, allowing both your Carnage and your auras to reach faraway enemies. Paladins are the most tanky class in the entire game, so this is a great option if you are not interested in your Barbarian constantly losing health. A Priest multi-class creates a Shaman, and this can be an interesting combo when using the Fury Shaper subclass. Priests are the best buffers in the game, and Fury Shaper gives you even more interesting buffs to play with. This combo is a great way to get the absolute most out of your entire team. A Ranger subclass creates a Savage, and keep in mind, Barbarian abilities such as Frenzy are not melee specific, so you can still benefit greatly from this as a ranged character. That being said, Carnage only triggers on melee attacks, and for that reason, I would say this combination doesn't really make sense. A Rogue multi-class creates a Marauder, and this can be fun because rogues are already squishy, so this combo works perfectly for a constantly bloodied Barbarian playthrough. You'll also have more options to get around quickly if that's important to you. Finally, a Wizard multi-class creates a Warlock, and this can be amazing for a War Mage type of campaign. Wizard has multiple spells that summon a weapon into your hand, most notably Sitzel's Spirit Lance, which will trigger an area of effect on top of your Carnage ability. High intelligence will ensure those spells last longer, so you are free to focus on summoning weapons and or make use of the amazing self buffs wizards have access to. It's a powerful combination. Alright, now that you have the ins and outs regarding Barbarians, let's review the build. As far as race, I would pick an Ocean Folk Human, because that option will help the most if you are focusing on regular attacks. If you are focused more on abilities and consumables, then the power level increase from a Death God-like will be more beneficial. For the subclass, I would choose Berserker and use Drugs or the Devil of Karak Breastplate to mitigate the Confusion debuff until I got the Mod Weir Soulbound weapon. That sword, when fully upgraded, will make you immune to all intellect afflictions, which not only nullifies the confusion issue, but also makes the Barbarian's low will score much less relevant, paired with whatever other weapon fits your fancy. For attributes, I would take a 14 in Might because my damage isn't from one major hit. It's a series of bug bites that decimate opponents. I would leave Constitution at 10 because I wouldn't mind being hurt or bloodied. Dexterity is extremely important for speed, and Perception is essential for accuracy, so they get a 17 and 16 score respectively. Intellect is going to help Carnage reach every enemy, along with making my buffs last longer, so that gets a lot of focus as well. Investing in Resolve isn't effective because my deflection and will scores are going to be mediocre no matter what. A good priest and solid tactics will make up for this. For culture, I would take Ovelia and get another +1 to intellect. I would also take the mercenary background, which thematically fits Barbarian, along with providing a +1 bonus to athletics and intimidate, which are the skills I plan to focus on. I would also take the sword and saber proficiencies. All right, now let's look over the abilities. Obviously, I would start with Frenzy, and then I would take Bloody. These are basically must-have, regardless of what kind of playthrough you're doing. Then at power level 2, I would definitely pick up 2 weapon style, and I would pick up Thick Skin. You don't have to rush this, but when you come to a point where there's nothing else really good for you to take, go ahead and pick it up. It's going to make it a little more tanky. Accurate Carnage is really nice. Obviously, I have high intelligence because I want Carnage to hit as many enemies as possible. Wilder Hunt is the same basically as Thick Skin. When you have an extra point, go ahead and pick it up, but you don't really have to rush it. Then at power level 3, definitely want to take one stance alone, and you're going to also want to pick up Bloody Slaughter. No question, you want those ASAP. The increase to reflexes is, again, one of those points where somewhere down the line when you got an extra point to spend, you can go ahead and pick it up. And then finally, we also have Bloodlust. This is absolutely another passive ability that you're going to really want. Power level 4, no question, go ahead and pick up Spirit Frenzy. And then you're also going to want Unflinching. That's going to make your Barbarian more tanky. And along with Mondwin's immunity to intellect afflictions, his low will is just going to be really mitigated by some of the things he naturally has, on top of, again, your priest doing what he or she is supposed to do. At power level 5, we're going to go ahead and pick up Leap, and then you're also going to want Uncanny Luck for that conversion of hits to critical hits. And then of course you're also going to want to pick up Interrupting Blows. This is a high dexterity, dual wielding speed type build. We should be pumping out crits constantly, and consequently we're going to be interrupting enemies constantly. At power level 6, we want to go ahead and get Spell Resistance, which is going to allow us to resist hostile spells, so it doesn't have the same issue as the Mage Hunter subclass. And then we're also going to want to get Improved Critical. As I said before, we're going to be pumping out a lot of critical hits, so having them deal more damage is going to be beneficial to us. At power level 7, we absolutely want to go ahead and get Spirit Tornado, and then we'll also pick up Bloodthirst. Now, usually, if I was multi-classing Barbarian, then I would ignore some of these empower abilities, because we're not going to be using a whole lot of abilities as a Barbarian if we were multi-classing this. But since I'm not, so this is a pure Barbarian build, we're going to be using Heart of Fury quite a bit, and it absolutely makes sense for you to be empowering that. So I want to make sure it hits hard. The priority here is definitely take the accurate empower option and the penetration empower option, and then you can take the damage option later on. But what's most important is for the ability to actually hit. The damage it does is really going to take care of itself. And then obviously at power level 8, I'm going to go ahead and pick up Heart of Fury, and I'm going to go ahead and take that Dragon Leap upgrade as well. We'll also pick up the option that increases the number of times you can empower before resting, because we're just going to empower and use Heart of Fury probably every single fight. And then finally at power level 9, you're going to want to go ahead and take Blood Surge. Since we're going to be spamming Heart of Fury constantly, might as well go ahead and get this. And then we'll also take Barbaric Retaliation, which should let you pump out even more damage, since this character will probably get hit all the time. And all of that together, along with what I've already discussed, should absolutely help you to make a very effective Barbarian character. Overall, I would rank this class a C. The debuff to Carnage really harms Barbarians. Yes, they can be very powerful, but they pale in comparison to the way other classes can wipe out rooms without being on death's door. It's definitely best to multi-class them, but even then, the bonuses they provide can be outshined by other options. They are not nearly as tanky as paladins or fighters. Their area of effect abilities are paltry compared to druids or wizards. There's just nothing Barbarians give you that stands head and shoulders above the other classes, so unfortunately, they are not nearly as OP as they were in the first game. That ends my ranking of Barbarian, but please leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you disagree with any of my commentary? Would you have changed where I ranked the class? Looking forward to hearing your thoughts, and I hope you all enjoyed this video. Take care.